The history of Microsoft Windows. Microsoft Windows today is the most popular operating system on the desktop, having today a market power of 72%, being completely dominant over the rest of the alternatives. Additionally, being Microsoft's best-selling product along with the Office suite, followed by the products such as Xbox and the Bing search engine, and cloud services such as Microsoft Azure. Windows has had a very long road throughout the years, and many things have changed over time. Today we will go back from its beginnings and explore its entire history and how it has become the operating system it is today. The start, MS-DOS. You have to start by knowing the origins of Microsoft Windows, even before it was known as Windows. Windows is based on DOS, which stands for Disk Operating System, an operating system by IBM that was later acquired by Microsoft and became MS-DOS. MS-DOS was the operating system used by IBM computers in the 80s. As time progressed and technology evolved as computers were increasingly adopted in a domestic context, they saw the need for developing a friendlier interface for the common user. Microsoft Windows 1.0. Microsoft originally released the first version of Windows as a graphical extension for MS-DOS. This means that MS-DOS remained the basis of the operating system, while Windows was mostly a graphical interface with the purpose of facilitating the use of the operating system. This new graphical interface contained some programs that until today remain familiar to some, including Windows Paint, the Notepad, the control panel, and a terminal, as well as a very basic word processor at that time called Microsoft Write.
How much do you think this advanced operating environment is worth? Wait just 1 minute before you answer. Watch as Windows integrates Lotus 123 with my...
Windows 2.0. Windows 2.0 ended being more popular than the first release. Something important to highlight is the compatibility with the suite of Microsoft Office. At this time, Excel and Word for Windows, which previously could be run from MS-DOS, now were compatible with Microsoft Windows for the duration of the session and closing it at the moment of leaving it. This version of Windows could use a real-time memory model, allowing to use up to 1 megabyte of memory.
Geek Lab, and today I'm going to be showing you Windows version 2 from Microsoft.
Microsoft Windows 3.0. While between these three versions of Windows there is not a huge change, such as those we will see later, Windows 3.0 offered a superior multitasking capacity compared to its predecessors, thanks to the introduction of virtual memory. Additionally, for the first time we saw the introduction of multimedia extensions in 1991, which were sold in conjunction with sound cards from Creative Labs of the Sound Blaster brand, which continues to be one of the most important sound card brands today. This is when Windows began to grow in terms of the market power, becoming a highly successful operating system with more than 10 million copies sold in its first 2 years. Windows NT. As I mentioned before, all previous versions of Windows were basically built from MS-DOS, so Windows was nothing more than a graphical interface for the MS-DOS operating system. The NT kernel emerged as an effort to create an independent and more modern operating system than MS-DOS, distancing itself from IBM's root and making it 100% Windows. Windows NT was the first Windows based on an hybrid kernel, which was a modified kernel that did not yet understand all the specifications of a pure kernel. The inclusion of this new microkernel added support for new types of hardware and generally improved the performance and stability of the operating system. The NT kernel was originally implemented in the server and workstation operating system versions, and it was not until later that it was implemented as the only and primary kernel of the Windows operating system for home use. Windows 95. Subsequently, Microsoft began developing a new version of its consumer-facing operating system, codenamed Chicago. Windows 95 was one of the biggest steps towards the Windows we know today, as it laid the foundation for many of the systems and functionalities we know today from the operating system. Additionally, at each release, it was moving further and further away from its MS-DOS base towards a completely independent operating system, aspiring to a greater performance, stability, and of course, more modern features, as MS-DOS base as an operating system was beginning to feel obsolete and a breeze of fresh air was needed. Windows 95 was heavily marketed with a large number of television commercials and was Microsoft's most popular operating system to date, beginning to establish Microsoft dominance in the operating system market, with even more market power than today. Probably the most important feature introduced in Windows 95 was the Start menu, which remains one of the most important pillars of the operating system to this date. Other representative features were also introduced, such as the recycle bin and programs such as Internet Explorer, even though the latter was considered quite flawed and unstable. As for compatibility, it should still run without any problems MS-DOS programs, and was much more optimized for 32-bit programs. Windows 98. Windows 98 did not introduce too significant changes, but was rather an improvement over the basis that was Windows 95, especially in the area of stability, as well as improvements in the compatibility with new hardware that was being introduced to the market. There were also improvements to the Internet Explorer that had been introduced in Windows 95, at a time that was really important for Microsoft due to the constantly increasing popularity of the Internet for home users. One of the most important events at the time was the so-called United States against Microsoft, in which the United States Department of Justice accused Microsoft of abusing its monopolistic power on personal computers in terms of the operating system to more easily distribute their browser, Internet Explorer, and make it difficult to obtain third-party browsers, at the time Netscape or Opera, for example. It was further accused of having altered its programming interfaces to favor Internet Explorer in terms of performance against its competition. As I mentioned before, many minor issues were fixed in this installment of the operating system, so it ended up being categorized as the most stable of the 9X family. Windows 2000. In the year 2000, Microsoft released an operating system quite similar to the version of Windows 95, with important improvements. It was noticed that Microsoft was having an approach to returning the operating system with a much simpler, more stable, and overall more attractive environment for the user. However, Windows 2000 was not that popular among the masses because its target audience was mainly businesses, and it was not intended for home use. Among the features that Windows 2000 introduced was the implementation of a DirectX patch that allowed modern games to run in the empty kernel, showing that Microsoft was moving further and further away from the implementation of MS-DOS towards a separate empty kernel as the basis of the Windows operating system. Windows ME. We have come to the controversial deliveries of Windows. Windows ME was the version of Windows 2000 that was aimed for the home user. Some of the features that frustrated Windows ME users was the difficulty of running DOS application on Windows, in addition to the instability as the operating system tended to crash frequently. It was not considered an important delivery since it did not bring such a large change to respect to previous deliveries, and always had a bad connotation related to its name. In addition to XP being around the corner, Windows ME didn't have much to offer. Windows ME ended up being considered as an intermediate delivery between 98 and XP. In the end, likewise, Windows ME was the last operating system based on the Windows 9X kernel and Windows XP. We have come to one of the greats, Windows XP, the first consumer-facing operating system with the implementation of the empty kernel. Despite being one of the most beloved operating systems At first, it faced considerable criticism, especially in the area of security, which was led to the development of 3 service packs. Windows XP showed to its users an improved interface and increased user-friendliness, and especially unparalleled stability. Additionally, the implementation of the anti-kernel in the consumer market resulted in an extremely fast. This in the end reflected in being Microsoft's longer-lasting operating system. Windows XP also improved memory administration as well. For example, the Office 2003 suite, specifically designed for use in Windows XP, which turned out to be one of the popular Office suites and more powerful to date. Windows XP proved to be a powerful operating system for both the home user and the business user, being extremely reliable and with useful programs for both areas, being the starting flagship software such as Windows Messenger. Windows Vista. Windows Vista was released in 2007 for the consumer, and one of the main features that was introduced was to precisely solve the security complaints on Windows XP that were at the beginning. Windows Vista introduced something called user account control, replacing the default administration policy in Windows XP, and this changed in Windows 7. Another of the most drastic changes was the introduction of Windows Aero, which added a composer that allowed the system to have that glass-type transparency. This was not so well received, since the requirements to run Aero Glass theme were quite high, since they required a graphics card that was at least comparable with DirectX 9, supporting Pixel Shader 2.0, as well as to be set to 32 bits per pixel, and at least having 64 megs of graphics memory, while having at least 520 megs of RAM available. So the minimum to run the operating system was 1 gig of RAM, which by the time not all computers were able to meet these system specifications, so most computers were limited to run the system without all these effects with the basic theme, and still for the hardware at the time, the operating system was quite slow compared to XP, being so demanding. So most people decided to stay on Windows XP, not only because of performance issues, but because XP overall worked much better and was much more reliable for systems of the date than Vista. Windows 7. Even though Windows 7 was really similar to Windows Vista, it was its completely refined version. Although Windows Vista was harshly criticized for having problems with performance compared to XP, when Windows 7 was released, hardware was much more powerful and was prepared to run an operating system of this caliber. And for many people, Windows 7 represented a solid successor to Windows XP and convinced them to make the change. Windows 7 in general was an improvement over Vista and included additional optimizations for laptops, better performance, as well as interactive thumbnails on the taskbar, and the option of presentations in the wallpaper. Outside of Windows 7 bringing ultra-innovative features, people were very happy with the operating system because it simply worked and served its purpose wonderfully, being easy to use, visually appealing, and very efficient, even running on computers with more limited resources. Everyone was very satisfied with the performance of Windows 7, and at the time, Windows users were not looking forward for the next version of the Windows operating system. Windows 8. When Windows 8 was announced, we were in an age where touchscreens were flourishing in an impressive way, and not only in smartphones but in tablets as well. So many companies took advantage of that success in the tablet world. It stands to reason that a company would like to capitalize on what is most popular at the moment. However, when you try to mix two concepts, either as in this case, of which the audience's goals are completely different, or even when they are similar, you can't guarantee that the final product will be good. Not only by Microsoft, but other companies also tried to merge the concept of the tablet with their product, resulting in products not so attractive to their customers, which in effect they were not waiting, nor asking for such a product, since it was not increasing the value it provided to the customer, but decreasing the value it already provided by incorporating a new concept. A similar example is Nintendo with the Wii U, which by forcing the concept of the tablet on its console, it increased production costs and could not be on par with its competitors in terms of power. When to attract a new market, you force a new concept, which ends up sacrificing the usability and characteristics of your current users, we know that we are on the wrong track. And that's a big mistake. This is what effectively happened with Windows 8, introducing the Metro interface with the aim of serving the tablet market and both surfaces and desktop computers at the same time, with an unified operating system. We managed to keep people on Windows 7, being a much more appropriate system for a desktop computer. The most annoying change of Windows 8 was that it completely removed the Start menu, which, as we mentioned earlier, has been the representative emblem of Windows since '95, replacing it with an interface of the type that has previously debuted on Windows phones. According to Bill Gates, his vision for the future of computing was for touch interfaces and voice to replace the mouse and the keyboard, something completely unfortunate. The Start menu replacement contained the live tiles that provided information from time to time, and a larger button interface that was much more touchscreen oriented, but felt clumsy, slow, and ineffective when it comes to interacting with it on a real computer. Windows 8.1 improved a bit the aspects that bothered people, but it was basically the same, and basically represented a transitional operating system while people waited for the next iteration of Windows. Windows 10. The goal of Windows 10 was mainly to return to the idea of offering a complete computing experience, separating it from the look of tablets, but keeping the Metro look of Windows 8, and giving the option of the tablet functionality, but without taking over the feature of the main desktop operating system. This has made people much more satisfied with Windows 10. However, there are users who have not been satisfied with this version, and this includes me, due to the introduction of junk characteristics and tons of bloatware that have made many people rather prefer to stay on Windows 7. Windows 8 tried to be a fairly light operating system to run on tablets at the time, but Microsoft decided to move away from that idea. With Windows 10, they decided to fill the system with junk, adding telemetry everywhere and a keylogger, effectively turning the operating system into spyware and filling it with useless programs, thus bloating it, and in the process making it extremely resource hungry. As a consequence, it has been really difficult to run on older machines, leaving many computers obsolete, running horribly even on decent hardware, and making it practically mandatory to use an SSD to run it decently. Taking advantage of features such as the live tiles, they also decided to implement ads in the Start menu, such as Candy Crush and Netflix. While Windows 10 fixed many issues with Windows 8, it also makes even worse mistakes. But these are not so apparent to the common user, therefore there are not so many complaints, and those who are aware of these problems are forced to use the operating systems, since Microsoft is constantly forcing it on previous Windows users and making them less and less usable over time. There are ways to partially get rid of Windows 10 spyware, and it is what several users more aware of the problem do. However, it is so tied to the operating system that it is simply not possible to get rid of everything just to damage control. However, we are in an age where the hardware is much more powerful and is able to compensate for the use of such an inefficient and garbage-filled operating system. And in the correct hardware, Windows 10 moves quite well and is to some extent usable for certain users, and it can represent a good value offer. Windows 11. Even though Microsoft had announced that Windows 10 would be the last Windows operating system, Microsoft recently announced its successor, Windows 11, which is actually similar to Windows 10 from a basic concept. Basically the only change is a redesign to the graphical interface, which was ultimately already quite needed, offering rounded edges and a more minimalistic look. Functionally, it is basically the same as Windows 10. Windows 11 doesn't actually represent a big change, and I wouldn't want users to feel the pressure to upgrade to a new operating system that is not widely tested yet, that has still many bugs around and granted an increased resource consumption. Though the increase in resource consumption has not been as high compared to when we moved on from Windows 8.1 to Windows 10, it is still a much heavier operating system than it should, and it has had the clear purpose of leaving a lot of hardware obsolete, asking for completely unnecessary features to be installed, which are mostly only found on hardware from 2017 or 2016. But for those who have a computer powerful enough to run it properly, the new graphical interface is definitely a massive improvement to what we had in Windows 10, and many people will find themselves satisfied to have this change and a breath of fresh air, having had the Metro theme since 2012. Conclusion. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you found it informative, even though I shared my personal opinion. And if you feel this operating system has been a great upgrade compared to the previous versions, I am quite glad that you are getting the most out of it, since it can be quite powerful. Having said that, I invite you to subscribe and leave in the comments your opinions and experiences that you have had throughout your life with Windows. What memories make you nostalgic, and in your opinion, which is your favorite Windows? And of course, the most important thing, I would really appreciate if you leave some feedback, since this is one of my first videos and I would like to improve the quality as much as possible. In the same way, I invite you to leave your like, and we will see you very soon in another video.